Task completed. On the day of the male lead's wedding, I faked my death and left. During the ring exchange, he suddenly ran back to the villa. I'm getting married. Where's Luna? Did she make a scene? But in the room, only my attending physician sat there. The man coldly tossed a letter on the table in front of him. Luna died 6 hours ago. You didn't know. Ken, are you sure you want to marry her? Why not try me? I smiled weakly, according to the script, delivering my lines. Try you? Haven't I already felt enough of your cruelty? Ken's lifeless eyes stared at me, void of any emotion. Monica held up their entwined hands and said firmly to me, Luna, a person should know respect and decency. Please, control yourself. As they walked past me, closely snuggled together, I silently laughed. Finally, my task was complete. Yet, a faint sense of loss lingered. Who could be sure I hadn't genuinely fallen for him during those years of accompanying him under the guise of a mission? I had been transformed into a beautiful, wealthy, yet venomous supporting character. My task was to help the male lead succeed and get together with the female lead. For years, I secretly gave Ken everything he wanted, but made him believe it was Monica who provided. Now, with the task complete, my life force was slowly depleting. Just when I turned to leave, I felt dizzy and stumbled a few steps. The astonished gasps of passers-by grew around me. Ken noticed too, but I clearly heard him say coldly, she's faking again. Just let her be. She won't actually die. If she does, it would be a good thing. The world will have one less venomous woman. In my haze, it felt like going back to the days when I picked up a young Ken, singing and playing under the cherry blossom tree, and brought him back to the villa. Luna is the most important person in my life. Ken will never let her down. He once made this solemn promise. He also had rushed to the hospital during my painfully severe periods, urgently asking the doctors for medication in front of many people. I remember clearly, when asked if my hands or feet were cold, he blushed and said quietly, I haven't even held her hand. But those beautiful moments quickly vanished, because he met the love of his life, Monica. Monica might not be beautiful or wealthy, but her passion, determination, persistence, and courage deeply attracted Ken. When Monica and I both reached out to him, he chose Monica without hesitation. Luna, we're not suited to be lovers, let's just stay family. When the cold hospital machines zeroed out, I floated in the air, realizing I had died. Yes, as his story reached its end, I developed an incurable disease, and was already running out of time. I floated to Ken's wedding hotel to see him in a suit one last time. Ken looked amazing in a suit. I remembered a long time ago, skipping school with him to go window shopping, admiring the most beautiful black wedding dress from a store window. Through the glass reflection, Ken's eyes were on me, gently caressing my hair saying, this wedding dress will belong to our Luna one day. But now, that black swan-like wedding dress was perfectly worn by Monica, because Monica loved it too. Ken, do we still need to wait for Luna? An assistant quietly asked him. Wait for what? She's always making a fuss. Everyone stay focused today. Don't let her ruin my wedding. It's because of everyone's indulgence that she's grown to be like this. Frowning, he looked around to ensure I wasn't there, then lowered his gaze. Indeed, love and lack of love are evident. I used to be this unruly, but he indulged it, saying it was adorably genuine. The butler said Luna didn't return to the villa and can't be found. Should we send someone to look? The assistant questioned again. Ken, already impatient, headed to the stage. Just ignore her. Soon, the wedding formally began. I floated beside Ken, smiling bitterly. Ken, you expelled me from school, severed all my social ties, froze all my accounts, leaving me with just a meager allowance. Do you really hate me that much? I guess I should congratulate you on your wish coming true. The once dazzling Luna now can't even afford her medication. Although death was my unavoidable fate, did you know? When the cancer flares up, my bones ache terribly. Mr. Ken, do you promise to love Monica forever, to cherish and protect her? When the officiant asked, Ken smiled warmly, full of love for Monica. Of course, I will. I will always love and protect her. Luna is the most important person in my life, and I will never let her down. The voice suddenly stopped, and the crowd was shocked. Not only was Monica stunned, but I too was utterly shocked. Did I hear it wrong? Ken called out my name. Most people then knew our story and started murmuring. Ken's eyes showed confusion, and his shoulders trembled, his gaze darkening. He scanned the guests slowly. Everyone fell silent. For some reason, his breathing became heavy. Ken has been extremely busy. Maybe he's just nervous and accidentally said the wrong name. The officiant quickly eased the situation, urging them to exchange rings swiftly. Monica forced a smile and stretched out her finger. Ken's face was also grim, as he raised his hand robotically, but in the next second, he quickly pulled his hand back. Sorry Monica, I just remembered I left something at the villa. Wait for me. He whirled around and sprinted out. The guests were all stunned. Ken, where are you going? Come back. Today is our wedding. But no matter how Monica called out, Ken just trembled and ran out. The man, dressed in his suit, ran desperately down the road, ignoring the woman's pleas behind him. Monica struggled with her wedding dress, hardly able to move, watching as Ken dashed towards the villa. The man burst into the empty villa, shouting like a madman, I'm getting married. Where's Luna? Did she cause trouble again? But in the room, only my attending physician, David, was sitting there. David sneered and tossed a letter in front of Ken. Luna died 6 hours ago. Didn't you know? Ken shuddered violently at first, then he started laughing. Another suicide attempt. Hasn't she done this many times before? Now she even wrote a letter. David's eyes turned red, and he walked up to Ken, punching him fiercely. Not a suicide, cancer. Luna was diagnosed with stomach cancer half a year ago. She didn't have money for treatment, and even saved on medication to cut costs. Half a year ago, Ken, to please Monica, had prepared a table full of spicy food and forced me to eat it. That night I lay in bed writhing in pain, but it wasn't even a fraction of the heartache. Ken, caught off guard, was punched sideways, wiped the blood from his mouth and roared, Impossible. I don't believe she would die. How could someone so malicious? David punched him again, with red eyes. Ken, you say she's malicious. You're the least qualified person in the world to say that. Do you really think you could sway the business world with your arrogant attitude? Luna begged each and every one of them behind the scenes for you. Even at the end of her life, the last thing she signed was transferring all her remaining shares to you. David, normally gentle and courteous, said with a chilling tone, Ken, now that Luna is dead, your good days are over. Ken, who had taken everything from me, couldn't accept this reality. I watched as he frantically picked up the letter, tried to unfold it, but his trembling hands eventually just stuffed it into his pocket. David, as my brother, you must have betrayed me and colluded with Luna. I'm telling you, dream on. You won't fool me. This forged letter of hers, I won't even look at it. She's probably off having a great time somewhere. He stumbled multiple times, knocking over furniture, and finally sat dazed on the villa's front steps, looking lost. His phone fell out of his pocket, ringing noisily. Ken didn't seem to hear it until much later, when he numbly picked it up. Where did you go? I heard Miss Luna is dead, our partnership is cancelled, and their CEO has pulled out. The assistant's anxious voice rang in his ear. They're even willing to break the contract to crush this deal. But Ken, their company is huge with many projects abroad. We can't afford to lose this. Pull out. Why? Ken sounded dazed. Their CEO said they chose us because of Luna. But now that she's dead and they know what you did to her, they don't want to help someone so ungrateful. For Luna, Ken's eyes flickered. Isn't this Monica's doing? The assistant sounded exasperated. Sir, with all due respect, you're probably the only one who trusts Monica unconditionally. Her education and skills wouldn't even get her past the resume screening. How could she close such a deal? At that moment, Monica arrived at the villa, having circled around. She heard the voice from the phone, her steps faltering, her eyes beginning to panic. Monica, I ask you. Ken hung up, his voice colder. You told me the deal was done. Were you the one who closed it? Monica vaguely agreed. In reality, she had confidently tried to persuade the partner, but didn't even get into the office. I found out they enjoyed good wine, so I went to their private room the night before. I drank like mad to seal this deal, scaring those seasoned drinkers. They were just drinking to socialize, but I was risking my life. Thankfully, I had asked David for some medication beforehand, or I wouldn't have made it through. The partner looked at me in a complex way and said, I wasn't going to work with you because Ken is too arrogant. But I don't understand. Why would someone like you risk your life for him? I clutched my stomach, almost fainting from the pain, and forced a smile. He's worth it. You'll see for yourself when you work with us. The partner paused, then said, all right, let me see what kind of man he is. That night, David took me to the hospital. The next day, I asked Monica to help me retrieve the contract. That's when she finally stepped into the office. Nobody mentioned who secured the deal, but everyone tacitly agreed it was Monica's achievement. She initially tried to explain in the face of Ken's exhilaration, but fearing rejection, she simply let it slide. Ken gazed at Monica. In that moment, his eyes were void of love, filled only with regret and mistrust. Was it really you? He whispered. Then tell me, how did you convince him? What did you promise him? Do you even understand this deal? What made a savvy business veteran willingly listen to you? Monica felt unnerved under his stare, cold sweat trickling down. Finally, she yelled out, it was Luna. The woman held her head and screamed, I never said it was me. You just assumed so and never gave me a chance to explain. You always said Luna was out partying and useless. I was scared you'd think I was useless too. Floating above Ken's shoulder, I saw the red veins spreading in his eyes clearly. In order to secure this deal, everyone used every possible means against each other. One company tried to drive a wedge between Ken and me. They had doctored some photos of me in nightclubs with strange men and sent them to Ken. Their goal was to make Ken believe that while he was struggling, I was indulging in debauchery, acting improperly. Despite the shoddy tactics, Ken chose to believe them and even called a board vote to strip me of my powers. Ken, we've spent over a decade together. Do you really not know me? Or deep down, did you actually hope I'd be this kind of person, so you could secure your position as CEO? It was really Luna. Ken suddenly recalled how I disappeared from the villa for half a month after the deal was secured. He quickly called David to ask where I went during that time. A cold voice came from the other end of the line. Of course, she was drinking herself into the hospital for you with the other party. Ken, if it weren't for you, Luna wouldn't have died so soon. He let out a chuckle. Do you know how disgusting you are? Do you still think Luna killed your cat? You might want to ask your dear mother about that. David finished and promptly hung up. Back then, Ken's father fell seriously ill, and his mother ran off with her first love. After suffering constant abuse, she saw Ken rising to power in the news and managed to contact me. I brought her home. Initially, she was warm to me but gradually began to see herself as the lady of the house, rejecting me more and more. Ken's mother lived a frugal life, and didn't like my fashionable dressing style or outgoing demeanor. In stark contrast, she adored Monica, seeing her as a perfect partner to take care of her son. Ken's mother didn't understand business affairs, and couldn't grasp why I slept during the day. She'd constantly make noise to wake me up, thinking I was too delicate. She'd knowingly cook dishes with eggplant, which I despised, just to force me to eat in front of Ken, gloating about it. After moving into the villa, she thought the servants were a waste and laid them all off except the butler, claiming she could handle the chores herself. She thought I should work alongside her. A woman's place is behind her man, taking care of everything so he can focus on his work, she'd say, treating this as her rule. She tried to teach me house chores and even deliberately refused to cook to force me into the kitchen. I didn't fight back, because I knew I had little time left. And most importantly, Ken, back then, I truly loved you. Ken returned to the wedding venue alone. The guests had dispersed, except for Ken's mother, who had trouble moving around due to injuries from past abuse. She sat on the couch, anxiously waiting. Seeing Ken, she shouted, "I'm here, here." Glancing behind him, she frowned. What happened today? Why stop the wedding? What urgent matter? Ken just stood silently before her. Mom, Luna's missing. Luna, his mother reacted briefly, then dismissed it. What's it to us if that woman's missing? Call the guests back and finish the wedding. Don't let a woman like that cling to you. I'll never allow her into our family. Ken sighed. David said, Luna is dead. Even better. Ken's mother almost leapt in joy. She's been freeloading off you all these years, lazy and greedy, only making my life harder. If not for her, you'd have been with Monica, and I'd have grandkids by now. When I was your age, you were 5. It's because of Luna that you've been held back all these years. She got a free ride thanks to her dead parents, always showing off. Ken's eyes darkened. Even he couldn't deny that everything he had was because of me. Without me, he wouldn't have even finished his education. I funded his father's treatment and made sure he passed peacefully. Speaking of Ken's father, this man bore many hardships yet remained optimistic and kind, leaving me with many fond memories. When he stayed at the nursing home, I often visited him. He'd always cheerfully make little crafts for me. Despite his frailty from the medication, he always greeted me with a warm smile, claiming he felt better and would get back to his old self soon. He told me I had to live happily and never keep everything bottled up inside. Once he got out of the hospital, he'd take me on a ride around the city in his tricycle. He said it'd feel way better than any car. He'd call me child, and use his rough hands to pat my head. It had been years since anyone called me that. Ken's father was the first warmth I felt after coming into this world. Because of him, I could forgive Ken's mother for all her malice. I never understood why such a kind man would marry someone as sharp and mean as Ken's mother. Even now, she's still yelling her head off, and those attending her are people I paid for. They couldn't stand it anymore and all left, looking pissed. Come back. Do you believe I'll dock all your pay? She screamed. Mom, enough. Ken finally couldn't stand it anymore. Since Ken's mom came back and started showing up everywhere, he'd been a laughingstock in the news. He was fed up. Let me ask you, Mom. Ken took a deep breath. How exactly did Coco die? Coco was a kitten Ken found. He felt sorry for it, sympathizing with how it had been abandoned and homeless like him. So he brought it home and cared for it. Ken's mom fell silent, her sharp voice abruptly halting. Coco, why bring up that little thing? That day when I came home, I saw Luna burying something in the flowers. When I got closer, it was Coco's body. Ken steadied himself on the table beside him, his voice a bit shaky. At the time, I didn't think, and I just shoved her. She apologized to me, but now I think about it, was she burying, or digging, something? Mom, you've always been the only one at home who really hated cats and their shedding, right? Ken's mother paused and then roared, I'm your mother. Are you doubting me? On the way here, I had the butler check the cameras, Ken said with a bitter smile. Mom, Coco liked to climb onto the windowsill, so we always made sure to close the windows. Did you hate her so much that, when she jumped onto the windowsill, you opened the window? Ken's mom didn't even bother to hide her true self anymore. Even though she saw how much losing Coco devastated Ken, she still relied on her status as his mother and yelled, Ken, I'm your mother. Do you think I'm not worth more than some little beast? Do you know how annoying that kitten was? Always crying and pooping everywhere. And so what if I opened the window to air the place out? It's her own fault she jumped out. Ken took 2 steps back in disbelief, looking at his mother as if she were a stranger. So, when you were whispering in my ear, trying to get me to kick Luna out, it was all lies. Did she ever really abuse you like you said? I'm your mother. Ken's mom could only shout those 4 words at the end. I floated above, watching Ken's mom spit as she yelled. Her eyes were filled with wicked desires. Ken looked at her coolly, the light in his eyes slowly fading. Mom, you should go to a nursing home. I'll send someone every month with money for you, but as for anything else, don't bother asking. But is that really the end? I saw David, staring at his phone's wallpaper with my photo, murmuring, Luna, I loved you the first time I saw you. You were such a bright and beautiful girl. How could you end up like this? He closed his eyes, pressing his lips to the screen, as if kissing a lover. Don't worry, we'll repay everything we owe you. If you loved Ken, then I'll send him down to be with you. The young master of the top-tier family had returned. At the press conference, countless flashes were aimed at the man in the center. He was cold and aloof, his high-end custom suit making him look even more distinguished. The only odd thing was a woman's hair clip fastened to his collar. The purple stones on it were fading, giving it a worn and cheap look. But David sat there calmly, and no one dared to question him. As soon as he returned, he took over the family's largest construction company. Coincidentally, Ken was currently neck-deep in trouble there. David announced grandly that he'd rescue the construction industry, which Ken's company had dragged down. He declared he'd unite with other big players to take on the unrighteous Ken. It was a call to arms. David's unrivaled influence as the top-tier family's heir played a significant role, but it was also because, over the years, Ken had alienated too many people with his arrogance and talent. Back then, I often went around, humbling myself and apologizing on Ken's behalf. Those uncles and elders, out of respect for my deceased parents, grudgingly let things slide. Now that I'm gone, with David claiming that I was pushed to death by Ken's family, those same uncles and elders wouldn't tolerate Ken any longer. This outcome, diverging from the original plot, was unexpected, but I understood it was out of my hands. In a few days, I could return to my world. Ken, I've done all I could. I protected you for 10 years. Now, you must face the rest on your own. Ken is now abandoned by everyone, his assets frozen, with countless breach of contract lawsuits piling up. His properties and cars are mortgaged to the bank, but he stubbornly refused to mortgage the villa we lived in for over 10 years. Yet he lost everything else. Even his favorite watch was gone. Most of his employees were loyal to me, discontent with Ken's overbearing ways and his promotion of Monica. Now, learning of my death, they all resigned to join the competition. Everything he had was given by me, something everyone knew, except him. I willingly offered everything with open hands, yet he couldn't hold on to it. He thought, despite his insignificant background, he and Monica could conquer everything quickly with their own hands. He was simply too arrogant. In just a few days, Ken had grown a scruffy beard and lost a lot of weight. He started to look a bit like his father did back in the day. Now, his business empire was totally ruined. Even though he knew he trusted Monica wrongly and lost people's faith, he had to admit Monica might be the only one he had left. Ken was a man who loved himself more than anything. He feared loneliness and being abandoned, so he had to keep someone by his side. Monica, who always struggled to leave his protection, was the perfect choice. I saw him hesitate for a long time before dialing Monica's number on his phone, but she didn't answer. He bit his lip and threw his phone to the ground, then headed to the apartment he had gotten for Monica. The apartment was right next to the hotel, so he got there in a few minutes. He stood at the door, knocked a few times, and when there was no answer, he punched in the code himself. At this moment, if I could stop him, I definitely would have held his hand. What happened next would destroy Ken completely. Inside, clothes were scattered all over the floor. Monica was on the bed with the man who was always obsessed with her. They were locked in an intense embrace. Monica had just been publicly abandoned and completely distrusted by her lover. In her grief, she went to a bar to drink and met the man who had always silently protected her. They talked and drank, kissed, and eventually ended up at this apartment, using their bodies to ease their emotional pain. Ken's most ridiculous fault was his arrogance. He thought that giving Monica everything she could ever want would make her his willing servant. But what makes humans different from objects is that everyone has their own independent soul. No one is irreplaceable. I covered my ears and watched Ken, eyes bloodshot, charging at Monica and her lover. He grabbed the man in bed and slapped him, but weakened by days of bad rest and no food, Ken soon lost the fight. The man, seizing the chance to vent years of frustrated love for Monica, straddled Ken and beat him while taunting him viciously. Ken, you think you're still Luna's protected pet? You're nothing. What kind of man are you? Everyone knows without Luna, you're worthless. You didn't treasure her, drove her to death, and now you ruined Monica too. Believe me, I'll finish you off, Ken. Monica, terrified, huddled in the corner of the bed, covering herself with a blanket, trembling and crying. Ken's face, mixed with blood and tears, could only produce hoarse moans. The man beat him until he was barely alive, then suddenly stopped, laughing. Someone in the underworld put a bounty on something of yours. How about I collect that reward? Thanks, Ken. He lifted his foot and kicked Ken hard in the lower abdomen. When Ken woke up in the hospital, his face was bruised and sunken. There was also something new beside him, a catheter. David was sitting by the bed, holding my suicide note found in Ken's clothes. Ken opened his mouth, but his voice was gone. Only whimpers came out. Mr. Ken, or should I say, Miss Ken, David said with a smile. Without this thing that brought you much pleasure, do you feel lighter now? His voice gradually turned darker. Did you know, last August 15th, it was raining hard. Luna had awful cramps from her period. You ran out saying you'd get a doctor, but you took a call from Monica instead. She was stranded after going out, asking you to pick her up. Did you know, while you were entangled with Monica in that rainy night, a girl, enduring pain, went out looking for you. She thought you were caught in the rain because of her. You too shameless. But she almost got dragged into an alley by drunks if I hadn't happened to pass by that night. Do you know how horrible it could have been for my Luna? David's teeth clinked softly as he said, trembling slightly, I really want to kill you. The next day, she wanted you to go with her to report it to the police, but you thought she made it up to get your company, and you yelled she deserved it. Ken's eyes reddened. It's over. David suddenly picked up a fruit knife, started peeling an apple on Ken's bedside. His face softened as he said, I first met Luna at school. I had a heat stroke and collapsed in the nurse's office. She took care of me. Just like this, she sat by my bed peeling an apple. His fingers were long and clean. She said she liked peeling the apple in one complete piece. It tasted better that way. Ken stared wordlessly at him. Once, Ken returned home angry from a day's meetings, and I peeled apples for him the same way. But then he would sweep my hand away, saying, I don't have time for your nonsense, don't bother me. David smiled up at him. So now, let's let this apple decide your fate. If the peel breaks. Ken met his gaze with growing terror, struggling to get up and call for help, but David pinned him back down with a hand on his shoulder. Luna was in a lot of pain when she was alive, both physically and mentally. She hurt so much that she couldn't eat or sleep. By the end, even taking a single breath made her bones ache. She loved strawberries, but you took all her money away, so she couldn't afford them. I loved her for so long. I saw her as my light, my belief. Now that you've destroyed my light, Ken, do you think I should kill you? David suddenly raised the knife and stabbed down, but when the knife tip touched Ken's neck, it abruptly stopped. Ken kept his eyes shut tight, his face pale as a ghost. The room smelled awful. David chuckled softly. Ken, you've wet yourself. You look really pathetic now. If Luna saw you, she'd totally despise you, wouldn't she? No, please. Ken's eyes showed a pleading look. It was the first thing he'd said with difficulty since waking up. Don't worry, I won't kill you. David stood up, sunlight pouring in through the window behind him. I'm gonna watch you sink into hell step by step. I want you to spend your life atoning for what you did to Luna. The apple in his hand fell to the floor, its skin remaining whole, but the flesh splattered. David walked out the door. Ken struggled to pick up the so-called suicide note lying nearby, but when he opened it, he saw there wasn't a single word on it. "Luna," he croaked, collapsing to the ground. "You don't even wanna say a word to me." I didn't want to see the once-spirited boy become this crazy, pitiful figure. I turned and floated away. That same day, I returned to the real world. I opened the book and saw the story had indeed changed, with everyone having new and different endings. Monica, after witnessing that chaotic fight, went insane with fear. She hadn't done anything too terrible, but her abilities couldn't match her ambitions. Even though she had the main character's halo, relying on men for pleasure would eventually lead to being abandoned by wealth. Ken ended his life one night with the fruit knife David left, and David took over Ken's company. He planned everything, kept his hands clean, yet made everyone pay. His fingers were still long and clean, and he visited my grave and brought flowers every year. He never married. My tombstone bore the words "My love." I closed the book and left the library. At the entrance, I passed by a group of high school boys and girls laughing as they walked in. For a moment, it felt like I was back in those days. That year, Ken ditched me to hang out with Monica. I finished my turn cleaning the classroom alone. As I walked out, I heard a lively shout from a boy. "Luna, come down. I bought your favorite chocolate cake. Hey, there's no class this afternoon. Wanna go see a movie with me?" He raised his hand to shield his eyes from the sun, sunlight streaming through his fingers. If time could go back, I'd definitely say yes. That year, I left my hairpin in the nurse's office, and he kept it safe for his whole life. You changed the ending for me, so why can't I break all the rules for you?